Hello students, I'm coming to you with the first video lecture on Chapter 1, Part 1. So in this video lecture, we will cover a number of concepts, including the difference between data in a data set, the difference between variables and constants, attributes of a variable, the difference between independent and dependent variables, and the difference between positive and negative relationships between variables. And at the end of this video, I will give you the opportunity to check for your understanding of these concepts. By the end of this video, you should be able to understand and explain the difference between data in a data set, understand and identify the attributes of a variable, understand and explain the difference between direct and indirect relationships between variables, understand and explain the difference between a variable and a constant, and finally, understand and explain the difference between an independent and dependent variable. So let's first look at the difference between data and a data set. Data can be in the form of numbers, which is what we refer to as quantitative data, and or text, which is what we refer to as qualitative data. Data can be gathered using a variety of data collection methods, including surveys, focus groups, and interviews. Groups of data that are gathered in research studies are referred to as data sets. So in terms of quantitative data collection methods, this typically includes surveys or opinion polls. In terms of qualitative data collection methods, this typically includes interviews or focus groups. However, for the purposes of this video, we will just focus on quantitative data collection methods. So here on the left-hand side of our screen is an example of a survey. And on the right-hand side is an example of a data set that was yielded from this survey. So in terms of how we go about reading this data set, we read cases horizontally from left to right. So with this first case, this person is 32 years old, their gender is female, their income is $70,000 per year, their religion is other, their marital status is divorced, and they have a total of 22 years of education. We read variables within the data set vertically. So the variables we read going from top to bottom of the screen. So this is the variable for age, for gender, income, religion, marital status, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about the difference between variables and constants. Quantitative research studies focus on the measurement of a limited number of variables. A variable is a trait or characteristic that differs among the people or cases within a data set. So here's an example again of our data set, and the variables within our data set include age, gender, income, religion, marital status, and education. A constant is a trait or characteristic that does not differ among the people or cases within a data set. So in this particular case, the constant is gender. As you can see, everyone in the data set is female. Now let's look at the attributes of a variable. So attributes are the different categories that a variable can assume, also referred to as value labels or value categories. Here's an example. So as we can see, the attributes of the variable gender are male and female. The attributes of the variable religion are Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, other, and none or atheist. And the attributes of the variable marital status are single, married, separated, divorced, and other. Now let's look at the difference between independent and dependent variables. So in research studies, independent variables are the variables that influence, and dependent variables are the variables that are influenced. So here's an example. In this case, marital status influences one's income. However, we must keep in mind that correlation does not imply causation. And I'm sure many of you have heard this phrase before. Essentially, what it means is that just because two variables are related or correlated doesn't necessarily mean that one caused the other. So it could be the other way around, that one's income influences one's marital status. So we must keep that in mind. Now, finally, let's look at the difference between positive and negative relationships between variables. So variables co-vary together. In a positive relationship, two variables go in the same direction simultaneously. In a negative relationship, two variables go in opposite directions simultaneously. So here's an example. In positive relationships, we can have two scenarios: that as the independent variable increases, the dependent variable also increases at the same time. Or the independent variable can decrease while the dependent variable also decreases at the same time. And on the other hand, in negative relationships, the independent variable can increase while the dependent variable decreases at the same time. In addition, the independent variable can decrease while the dependent variable increases at the same time. So here are some examples. In a negative relationship, as age increases, income can also decrease. In a positive relationship, one's level of education can decrease, while one's level of income can also decrease at the same time. So in summary, we talked about the difference between data and data sets, variables and constants, attributes of variables, the difference between independent and dependent variables, and the difference between positive and negative relationships between variables. So here's an opportunity for you to check for your understanding. You can do this in a number of ways. You can simply click here and enter your name and respond to each of these questions here. Essentially, what you're being asked to do is indicate your level of understanding of each of the concepts covered in this video lecture. So each of the concepts are listed out to the left here, and you simply click on each one and you indicate whether you get it, you kind of get it, or you don't get it at all. Once you've completed this, you simply hit submit and it will record your responses. If for some reason you are unable to access this and complete it directly in the PowerPoint, you can also copy and paste this link into your browser, or you can scan this QR code using your cell phone. Either way, you may be able to access this particular survey or form to check for your understanding of these concepts. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next class.